Hello everyone. Before we begin our descent, make sure to like and subscribe to Hush Ledger. Leaving a comment telling us where you re-listening from helps the algorithm keep you in the dark with us. Now, let's begin. Story 1. The Man in the Ditch. My childhood was a series of identical, sun-bleached suburbs on the outskirts of Phoenix. Our house was at the very end of a cul-de-sac, where the neat lines of manicured St. Augustine grass gave way to the raw, dusty Arizona desert. The backyard fence wasn't a real boundary. It was just a symbolic line we weren't supposed to cross. Beyond it was a vast empty stretch of land dotted with creosote bushes and the skeletal forms of saguaro cacti, all leading to a deep concrete drainage ditch that would only fill with a furious brown rush during the monsoon season. I was 7. My world was small, and my best friend was a boy called Mr. Grimes. I found Mr. Grimes one afternoon while digging for fossils with a plastic shovel near the ditch. He was just there, leaning against the rough, sun-warmed concrete of the culvert. He was tall and thin, dressed in a dark suit that seemed to swallow the relentless sun, leaving him in a pocket of cool shadow. His face was long, his skin pale and waxy, like a candle that had been lit once and then forgotten. He never smiled, but he wasn't unfriendly. He was just quiet. My parents were thrilled. I was an only child, prone to lingering in the quiet corners of the house. They saw Mr. Grimes as a healthy expression, my imagination. They'd ask about him over meatloaf and mashed potatoes. "What did you and Mr. Grimes do today, sweetie?" my mom would ask, smiling at my dad. "We talked," I'd say, pushing my peas around the plate. "He doesn't like the sun. He says it's too loud." They thought that was charming. The details of Mr. Grimes were unnervingly consistent. He always wore the same suit, a charcoal gray thing that was never dusty, never wrinkled, despite him always sitting in the dirt. He smelled like wet clay and old pennies, and his voice drops to a whisper. It wasn't a sound you heard with your ears, not really. It was a vibration that started at the base of my skull, a low, resonant hum that formed words directly in my mind. He told me things a 7-year-old shouldn't know. He described the feeling of dirt filling a mouth, the sound of a rib cage cracking under pressure, the specific, coppery taste of fear. I didn't understand the words, not then, but I felt them. They left a cold, heavy feeling in my stomach, like I'd swallowed a stone. The unease began to curdle into dread one sweltering July afternoon. The air was thick and heavy, humming with the buzz of cicadas. I was sitting with Mr. Grimes in our usual spot, the shade of the culvert offering little relief. He was quieter than usual, his long, pale fingers steepled under his chin. The vibration in my head began. "A man is coming," it hummed. "He is lost, he is afraid, he will try to hide in my home." I looked around the barren landscape. There was no one. Just the heat shimmer rising from the sand and the distant, wavy line of the mountains. "Where?" I asked aloud. "Soon," was the only reply. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house was silent, save for the low groan of the air conditioner fighting a losing battle against the desert night. My window was open, the screen letting in the dry, cool air, and then I heard it. Not in my head, but with my ears, a real sound. The crunch of gravel, followed by a frantic, scuffling nose. Then, a man's voice, slurred and panicked. "No, no, get away from me." I crept out of bed and peered through the blinds. The moon was full, casting a sickly silver light over the backyard. And there, at the edge of the ditch, I saw him, a real man, stumbling, his clothes torn. He was looking back over his shoulder, his face a mask of pure terror. He half slid, half fell into the concrete ditch and scrambled into the dark mouth of the culvert. My spot, Mr. Grimes's spot. A profound silence fell. The cicadas had stopped. The world was holding its breath, and then, from the black hole of the culvert, I heard a new sound. A wet, choking laugh. It was a sound that had no business existing in this world. It was the sound of mud and suffocation. I stood there, frozen, my small fingers gripping the windowsill. I didn't scream. I didn't run from my parents, I just watched. A few minutes later, a figure emerged from the culvert. It was Mr. Grimes. His pale skin was now dark and glistening in the moonlight. He stopped in the middle of the backyard, and slowly, deliberately, he turned his head and looked directly up at my window. He raised one of his dark, slick hands and gave a single, slow wave. Then he was gone, just vanished into the shadows between the creosote bushes. The next morning, the police were there. Their cars were parked on the street, their radios crackling. An officer with a kind face talked to my parents in the kitchen. I heard snippets: escaped convict, violent, last seen in the area. My mom found me listening. She knelt down, her face pale. "Honey," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Did you see or hear anything strange last night?" I looked from her worried face to the police officer standing behind her. I thought of the wet, choking laugh. I thought of Mr. Grimes's dark, waving hand. "No," I said. "I was asleep. I never saw Mr. Grimes again." They found the convict a week later, during a routine check of the drainage systems after a brief rain. He was crammed deep inside the culvert, in a section the workers said was too narrow for a man to fit. The official report said he drowned in a puddle of stagnant water. But my dad, who knew one of the EMTs, told my mom in a hushed voice later that the man's lungs were full of dry, packed silt. I'm 32 now. I live in a city where there is no desert, no ditches, no vast, empty spaces. But sometimes, on a quiet night, when the central heating kicks on with a low hum, I'll feel a vibration at the base of my skull. And I'll remember that having an imaginary friend isn't always a sign of creativity. Sometimes, it's a warning. Story 2. The tapping on the slate. I grew up in a centuries-old cottage in the English countryside, a place that smelled perpetually of damp stone, wood smoke, and my grandmother's rosewater perfume. The walls were thick, the floors were uneven slate, and the windows were small, lead-lined panes that looked out onto a sprawling, untamed garden. It was a lonely, beautiful place, especially for a 5-year-old. My parents were always busy, Dad restoring an old car in the barn, Mom painting her watercolors in the light of the conservatory. So, I made my own friend. Her name was Eliza. Eliza lived in the reflection of my bedroom window. At night, when my room was lit and the world outside was black, the window became a perfect, ghostly mirror. And she would be there, standing in the reflected version of my room. She looked just like me, same mousy brown hair, same blue pajamas. But her eyes were a little darker, her smile a little sharper. She didn't speak. Our conversations were a game of charades. I would hold up a toe, and she would hold up the same one. I would wave, and she would wave back. The first sign that something was wrong was the tapping. It was a soft, rhythmic sound, like a pebble being knocked against the glass. Tap, 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 tap. It would always come from the window, but when I'd look, there was never anyone there. Just the dark, swaying shapes of the trees in the wind. Eliza, in the reflection, would mimic my confused expression, then she'd point a single, pale finger down towards the floor. Voice becomes quieter, more tense. The tapping started to change. It grew more insistent, more complex. It wasn't random anymore. It was a pattern. A slow, deliberate rhythm. I would start the moment my bedside lamp was turned off and continue until the first gray light of dawn. I started waking up with headaches, a dull throb behind my eyes that felt like an echo of that nocturnal tapping. I told my mother. She checked the window, said it was just the wisteria of vine tapping the glass in the wine. She cut the vine back. That night, the tapping was louder. Tap, tap, tap. One rainy afternoon, I was playing on the slate floor of my room with a set of wooden blocks. Eliza was in the window, mimicking my every move, building an identical block tower. I got frustrated with a stubborn block and slapped the floor hard with my open palm. The sound was a sharp crack on the cold stone. From the window, I saw Eliza look out from her blocks. She looked directly at me, and for the first time, her expression was not a mirror of my own. It was one of intense, focused understanding. Slowly, deliberately, she raised her own small hand and brought it down hard on her reflected floor. And I heard it, not from the window, but from underneath my feet. A sharp, answering crack from deep below the house. The floor vibrated faintly. My blood ran cold. I scrambled back from the window, my heart hammering against my ribs. Eliza just smiled, a wide, empty smile that didn't reach her dark eyes. She lifted her hand and brought it down again, crack, and again. From beneath the floor, the same sound echoed back, whispering. That's when I realized. Eliza wasn't in the window, she never had been. The reflection, it was a lie. She was under me. She had always been under me, in the cold, dark space beneath the slate floor. And she was only using the window to see me, to learn my movements, to copy my life. The tapping that night was different. It wasn't on the glass. It was a slow, grinding, scraping sound. It was the sound of something heavy being dragged across the stones beneath my floor. It would start directly under my bed, pause, and then move a few feet towards the door. Every night, it got a little closer to the thin, almost invisible trapdoor that led to the cellar, a trapdoor that was right at the top of the stairs, just outside my room. The dread was a physical weight on my chest. I stopped sleeping. I'd lie rigid in my bed, listening to the scraping, grinding progress from below. I could feel her down there, patient, relentless. My reflection, my copy, my cuckoo in the nest. The climax came on a night of howling wind and lashing rain. The storm was so loud it drowned out everything else, and for the first time in weeks, I fell into a deep, exhausted sleep. I was woken not by a sound, but by a sensation. The feeling of cold air on my face. My eyes snapped open. The trapdoor at the top of the stairs was open, a yawning, black square in the floor. And the cold, damp air from the cellar was washing into my room. And then, over the sound of the storm, I heard it. A soft, wet, shuffling sound on the stairs. Something was coming up. Something that moved with a terrible, unfamiliar gait. I didn't scream. I didn't move. I just stared into the darkness of that open trapdoor, waiting. The shuffling reached the top step. It was in the hallway now, just outside my open bedroom door. Voice drops to a terrified whisper, a small, pale hand, caked with dark soul and streaked with something glistening, curled slowly around the doorframe. The fingers were long, too long, and then, a face peered slowly into the room. It was my face, but it was wrong. The skin was waxy and pale as a grub. The eyes were solid, pitch-black orbs. And it was smiling, Eliza's sharp, empty smile. It took a single, shuffling step into the room. I finally found my voice. I screamed. A raw, primal sound that tore through the house. The thing in my doorway flinched, its smile vanishing. It let out a hiss that sounded like steam escaping a grave, and it scrambled back, disappearing down the trapdoor. The heavy door slammed shut with a final, deafening boom that shook the whole cottage. My parents found me in a state of hysterical terror. The trapdoor was locked, as it always had been. A heavy bolt rusted shut on the outside. They said it was a nightmare, brought on by the storm. They never believed me. We moved to London 6 months later. I never saw Eliza again. But sometimes, when I'm in an old building, and I walk across a cold stone floor, I'll feel a faint, answering vibration. A single, soft tap from below, and I know. Imaginary friends are a luxury of safe, modern houses. In old homes, with deep foundations and dark spaces beneath the stones, you're never just playing by yourself, you're inviting something up.